Hello everyone, this is YLAM here. In today's Adobe Wednesday, I'd like to take a look at some footage from the new Mavic 2. This is an exciting new camera. It has a Hasselblad 1-inch sensor on it. It promises to have some really great raw photos and also some really great dynamic range videos. So let's go ahead, take a look, and see if there's actually a drastic improvement with this new Hasselblad camera. As you can see, I already have the Adobe Lightroom suite set up. So what I've done is I went ahead and I set up my Mavic 2 alongside with one of my Fuji cameras. I went ahead and put my Fuji camera on a timer, and I went ahead and took the pictures side by side. As you can see, the ones with the green tint around them, they are from my Fuji cameras, and the one with the yellow tint on them, they are from my DJI Mavic 2. So let's go ahead and compare them side by side. The first example that you see here is me taking a picture in low light. So this is my studio with only my studio lights on. As you can see, it's relatively dark. Let's go ahead and see how much we can bring back out of the photos. So the first picture that we see here is from the Fuji camera. As you can see underneath the table, you don't actually see much. So let's see what we can do when we bring back the shadows. If I go ahead and I bring this all the way up to 100%, as you can see, the sensor still captured all the details underneath the table. Let's switch over to the DJI one. If I do the same test, as you can see, you can bring back and see all the details. This shows me that there is still a good amount of dynamic range. As we zoom in, as you can see, there is definitely some noise. Let's see what we can see on the Fuji side. If we were to go back down, if we were to compare the two, I would say there is a slight bit more noise on the DJI side, but considering it's only a 1-inch sensor, which means it's a smaller sensor, it's definitely doing very well for itself. Plus, I bet you if we go ahead and go back to the DJI image and we just apply a little bit of noise reduction, we can probably clean this up pretty well. And this is something that you're not going to notice when you're not zoomed all the way in. For you pixel peepers, you're probably going to get a little bit annoyed on that, but as a standard image, I think it's doing pretty well. And plus, we haven't applied any other processing to it. So it looks like the dynamic range of this particular sensor is doing pretty well for itself. Let's see what happens when we actually change the exposure compensation. So what I just did is I just removed all the effects that we just had. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play around with the exposure compensation to see how far I can push the images in terms of adding or removing light. If you push the Alt key, what you can do is you go ahead and add light. So right here, we're adding one. Let's go ahead and add one stop of light. As you can see, even with one stop of light, everything still has detail. We haven't blown out any part of the image. If we go to 2 stops of light and we push the Alt key, as you can see, some of the image at that point is being blown out, but it's still very controlled. If we go to 3 stops, as you can see more of it, but it's still very good. I mean, it's very well controlled. This is, by the way, the Fuji image. Let's go ahead and go over to the DJI image. If we increase it by 1 stop of light, see how much is blown out. Everything is still good. Let's move over to 2 stops of light. As you can see, this is actually looking better than the Fuji image. Let's go ahead and go to 3 stops, which is pretty far off our exposure. As you can see, there's quite a bit more that's being exposed out. If we compare the two, they're pretty comparable at 3 stops of light, which is quite interesting because what this really means is that the dynamic range of this particular sensor, it is living up to the Hasselblad name in terms of dynamic range. It seems to be really good. Let's go ahead and bring these back down to 0 and see if we can play around a little bit more with some of the other images. So in terms of low light, there's definitely some noise that you're going to be able to see, but that's to be expected with the smaller sensors. If you don't want to see image noise, you're definitely going to have to jump up to a full frame sensor, but we can't deal with that right now. Let's go ahead and jump to some of the other images and see what we can do with them. So in this particular example, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take a picture outside. This was taken during golden hour, so the light is very smooth, and the light is very warm, and it's not overly harsh. But what I'm going to try to do is I want to bring back some detail on this corner right here. So the whole point of this particular picture is to have this huge dark area that when you look at it has no detail. We're going to see if we can bring back that detail. So this is the Fuji camera. If I go ahead and just hit the auto button, you can see that it does bring back some of the detail, which is kind of nice. Let's see if we can bring back a little bit more of this. We're not going to worry about the rest of the image. The outside gets a little washed out, but as you can see, even though there's a lot of image noise, we can still see fine detail like this line right here that's going up and down inside. Considering the original image, there was absolutely no detail here. It's quite good in terms of bringing back some shadow detail. Let's go ahead and go to the Hasselblad camera. If we go ahead and just do the proper exposure, as you can see, the Hasselblad camera actually did a better job with exposure on this. If we look at the side and then we blow the dynamic range out a little bit, you can actually see that it did actually better in terms of shadow detail than that. I would say it actually did better than the Fuji camera, although this camera, the exposure has a little bit more on the upside, but overall it did a really nice job with shadow detail. Plus, the external image still well exposed, so this is really clean looking. This image over here, the left Fuji one, actually requires a little bit more work to bring back some of that wood tone, whereas on the Hasselblad camera you can see still the wood tone's pretty nice and rich. So overall, the Hasselblad camera did really well in this particular shot. So the next images that I'm showing you right now is I'm actually trying to show some contrasting colors. If you were to look at the Fuji image compared to what you see over in the DJI image, as you can see, the color science is going to be significantly different. On the Fuji side, it's definitely more neutral. It's definitely a lot flatter so that you can grade it to whatever you want. Whereas on the DJI side, the raw files are definitely much warmer. It's going to be a little bit harder to try to get that warm color out if you actually don't want it. So in terms of color science, you can see a dramatic difference right here in terms of what they're trying to do. So I would probably prefer the Fuji colors at this point on this one. So in this next set of examples, as you can see, the colors are very neutral, it's very even, whereas with the DJI camera, when you actually record it, it's significantly warmer. In fact, it's a little bit overly saturated in my point. Let's see what happens when we actually add a little bit of just regular grading to both of them. Just real quick grading. So as you can see, with a little bit of grading from Lightroom, the Fuji image is very balanced. It's really smooth and nice looking. Whereas on the DJI side, the image is still really good looking, but you can tell that it's very saturated. It's very warm. It has a different feel to it. This is not the type of image that I would like. I would actually try to pull a little bit of that gold image because it looks a little sickly in my opinion. I much prefer the Fuji cameras, but by all means, it's still a very acceptable image. And because we captured it in raw form, we can definitely bring some of that yellow out of it and make it into a nice, even image. So I did take the Mavic 2 out, and again, I flew at golden hour. And the reason why I want to explain why I'm flying at golden hour is because I did not purchase the ND filters with this drone. If I wanted to take images during daylight, I would have had to use ND filters. Unfortunately, I didn't have them. So to give the best chance of producing the best image possible, golden hour is generally the best time to do it without ND filters. This is the reason why I'm doing it at golden hour. These are some of the images that came back, and as you can see, these images look really good. They're very sharp. They have a lot of detail when you zoom into them. This is truly an excellent camera, and I'm very impressed with the dynamic range and also its color science. So let's go ahead and take a look at some sample images during golden hour when I was flying the drone. Just going to go ahead, drag it into my timeline. So I'm just choosing a part in the middle of the flight, and as you can see, as I'm flying along during golden hour, this is a very nice, well-exposed image. You can actually see the blue from the clouds. This is actually an image where the first few generation of DJI drones couldn't actually do. You either had to expose for the land or you had to expose for the sky. But these new sensors coming out now, you can actually get both, and they look very rich and very good. Let's go ahead and add an adjustment layer to it and see what we can change and see how far we can push the image. The reason why I'm moving the image back slightly is because over in this area right here, I want these dark tones. I want to see if I can actually recover some detail into these dark tones to see how well the image actually takes in terms of video. I'll just add it very quickly over that. I'm going to go ahead, open up the Lumi colors. Drag this out a little bit. Try to get a wider image. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and push up the shadows. And as you can see, when I push up the shadows over here on this side, you can see all the details coming back from the bushes. So that's really great news. You can actually lift back all those shadow details when you're exposing for a very bright golden hour day. And then if we go ahead and just add a little bit of contrast to it. All right, let's go ahead and return these back to 0. Unfortunately, Photoshop isn't really a super great grading tool in terms of trying to show this, but let's see what happens when we add a stop of light. It looks to be pretty good. You can still see some details in the sun or in the sky. So at 2 stops of exposure, as you can see, you're starting to blow out the sky. So on the video side, it's not going to be as forgiving as on the photo side, in which you can go up almost 3 stops and still have some really good detailed images. So that is a quick look at some of the images that I've gotten out of my Mavic 2. I've only had it out for a few flights, but I'm definitely impressed. I'm very happy with the sensor. I think it's worthwhile that they have this partnership with Hasselblad. I think it's going to really bear fruit. Again, this is just some sample images, and this is kind of an impromptu, not very scientific test, but you can see just from these little trial and errors that there is a lot of capabilities coming out of these images and these videos. I think a lot of professionals will be very happy with the compact size of the drone, but yet still able to get back some really amazing images. Let me know what you think, if you have one or if you don't have one, whether or not you would buy one. Is the improvement in the image really worth the extra $1,400 expense? Personally, I think it is a worthwhile upgrade, but I am a drone enthusiast, so I might be a little bit biased on that.